What is up, all you real estate loving individuals? This is episode number 19 of the Real Estate Take podcast, and I'm your host, Wendell Butler. This is your go-to podcast with tons of information regarding the current real estate market. We get various real estate professionals' current take on different areas of real estate. For today's guest, we have Justin Ferguson. Justin Ferguson is a dynamic leader in the commercial real estate industry and a passionate advocate for breaking barriers as a minority professional in a traditional non-diverse field. With nearly 2 decades of experience, Justin has established himself as one of the top transactional brokers in Southern Virginia, specializing in the Hampton Roads and Richmond markets. With 175 transactions and over $450 million in closed sales volume, encompassing nearly 3,000 units, Justin consistently helps his clients grow their portfolios and build wealth. His journey began in the mortgage industry, where he supported underserved communities during challenging financial times, eventually transitioning into residential sales, investing, and property management. Beyond real estate, Justin is a highly educated wine enthusiast, certified sommelier, and a wine director, an exclusive kitchen in Richmond, Virginia, holding advanced certificates from the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. He combines his passion for fine wine with his real estate expertise, creating unique opportunities at the intersection of these industries. In addition, Justin serves on the Real Estate Development Committee of a prominent affordable housing nonprofit, an accomplished children's book author, and an avid world traveler. So let's welcome in Justin. Justin, how are you doing today?
Great, Wendell. Good to meet you. Listen, everyone butchers sommelier, so you're not first. So we're glad to be
here. And we were actually talking about it before. I knew that I was going to say it wrong the second I started reading your bio, but sommelier, now I got
sommelier. It. Listen, it breaks the ice a little bit, but no, glad to be here. Thank you for having and allowing me to connect with your viewers and just share my stories of how I've been a broker and wine guy and help people, make money and change their lives a little bit.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you on here because we talk to a lot of just investors, not really the broker side as much, especially with commercial and bigger deals, which a lot of people are interested in. So you being the expert of it and knowing the day-to-days and the transactions and dealing with them all the time, it's going to be awesome to get your insight on stuff. So let's just start very broad and just get to know you a little bit more. I know I read your bio, but just dive into like a little bit about yourself, what got you into real estate, a little backstory, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, well, the backstory, I went to Penn State for architecture, got out of school in 2010, and no one won architecture, right? The market was still recovering on a slowly but surely trickle upward. So people weren't really hiring architects. It was more of CAD designers and guys who were going to be behind a desk. I remember doing ADA bathrooms, which is the most tedious, boring task as an architect in training. So I got into mortgages, loan origination. I was calling people, as mentioned in my bio. I was calling communities saying, hey, do you want to refinance? And that time, people were losing their homes and just terrified about the world. So it wasn't a great place to be cold calling a lot of families like, hey, let's refinance. And I was a young guy. No one wanted to trust me anyway. So that was tough, but we did it, learned a lot of good lessons there. Moved on into single family with Keller Williams for a very brief time. Way too many emotions, helping people sell their dream homes. They're buying a home, they're going to raise family, they want perfect paint color. Things, way too many touring. And I felt that wasn't exciting for me. I want, let's talk numbers and property management. Made there, and while I was in property management, I saw a broker who was doing very well. I remember driving in his Jeep one day, and we were touring the area. He was like, I sold that building. I sold that building. I remember selling that building. I know that guy. He likes this, just the level of detail. And it was kind of cool. It's like, if he can do it, I want to try it. And then I moved here to Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, where I'm at now, and jumped all in. And this is almost a decade as a broker in multifamily space. So I've been in real estate my entire professional career after school here.
That's awesome. And you said originally, what did you go to school for?
Architecture. So I went to school to design all the fancy buildings you see in the world. And as you're going through architecture school, you realize that if you're not the 1%, the 0.001% guy, you're mostly just doing supportive architecture, I call it, where you're doing good work, but it's not the fun, sexy, exciting stuff. It's just the regular brick and mortar, which I didn't really enjoy that as much.
Yeah. And it's like a similar path to me too, because I got into real estate. I was a sales guy. I didn't go to school for anything real estate at all. I went for to be a physician assistant. Realized that wasn't for me, but then I got into the mortgage industry. Same thing. I know where you're coming from. You're calling people. You're just talking about numbers, rates. You're dealing with cold calling and just trying to get people to refinance. It's not really filling. It wasn't as fulfilling as I wanted it to be. And that's what brought me into investing as well and getting into more number wise stuff. Because talking about numbers is a lot better than talking about color of paint on a wall and things like that. Because the worst thing is, I'm sure you've dealt with it in residential. You walk a property, it's everything's perfect, but then there's one little thing off, and they're like, I don't know, I don't want it. It's Come on.
Yeah, those things, you're touring people, your time, like in residential sales, and I love residential agents. They are hustlers. I think there's so many that kind of get a bad rep sometimes, but they are resi agents. We call them, are hustlers. Most of the time, you're touring people after work and weekends. It is a grind. So it just wasn't the grind that I wanted to do. So I just did that for a little bit and had to move on to the next opportunity, which was property management and sales.
Yeah, and talking about numbers too with properties, I like talking about that more because it's more just cut and dry. It's like, do the numbers work? Do they not work? And there's ways to manipulate the numbers to make it work. And if there is, you can get creative with it. And that's one cool thing about commercial properties as well, because that's a lot more numbers based, which I'm sure you can expand on later on too as we dive in more. So that's awesome. That's good to know. And it's cool to see the backstory and how you kind of became what you are today into commercial real estate and also a wine expert. How did you get into like being like a wine expert too? Is that always something you were interested in, or?
I think the broad picture, I think if you're in sales, you have an ego. You have to have an ego. Like there's this level of confidence, and people love to walk that border of like confidence and arrogance. Like if you're not confident in your own ability to sell something, I mean, I've been in commission sales for a long time. So I saw a movie called SOMM, SOMM, came out in 2012, where it was like the guy was going up to be a master sommelier. Now the master sommelier test is literally one of the hardest tests in the world. You have to blind taste 6 wines and almost name the piece of land it came from in the year. So like there's this level of this level of intensity, and like I saw the guys doing, they're confident. I'm like, that sounds cool. I like appreciate the hustle and their confidence. They believe in themselves, and that sparked interest in like wine is something you can enjoy, but it's also you can like really learn and study. I mean, I've learned way more about geography and climate and topography studying wine than I did in school. So it's like these little things that you think about. And then during COVID, right, everyone was sad, right? We thought the world was going to shut down, and I was already consuming a lot of alcohol anyway. So I said, why not just start studying it and get some letters behind my name? So wine became something of, I saw people doing it. As you know, client dinners, at the celebration, people are ordering wine. Like, why are they ordering this wine and not that one? Why are we ordering wine in general? So commercial real estate, a lot of the guys who like real estate ended up like wine. So it kind of became this cool synergy of interest and hobby. And now I do it part-time. And yeah, COVID kind of made me take the official leap, and in 5 years and being deep in the wine industry at this point.
Yeah, and like that's awesome because that's like similar to like whiskey, right? Because whiskey kind of has similar traits. It comes from different countries, has different ways to, what do you say, brew? Is that what you call it, I guess?
Oh, yeah.
Distill the whiskey, you know, there's different ways to do it. There's different cultures, like in different ways that they do it. Depends like what type of barrel it's in, like the type of whatever. And you can get really like a lot of historic facts just from like one bottle of whiskey. And that's very similar with wine, probably more because wine has been, I think it's the number one, probably the most historic one called like, I guess, alcohol, like dating all the way back to like, I don't know, forever. You know?
Yeah, it's been around for a long time, and they were making it all kind of ways many moons ago, I call it. I think when you look at the details of wine and real estate, details, science, you know, wine to be a good winemaker is math and science, which a lot of people don't really understand. There's always this running joke, whatever side of the fence you're on, of like climate change, is it real? It's like ask a winemaker who tracks the weather every single day for decades, right? They know if things are changing. Like they have to be so in tune with their soil, the climate, the environment. Like there's this level of math and science and perfection that the wine industry has that people don't know about unless you start studying it. It kind of fit right in with, you know, talking IRR and cap rates and returns and renovations. Like there's this level of like hard math with commercial real estate that I appreciate. So it's just kind of a cool, let's me nerd out in the minutiae of stuff and also enjoy things at the same time.
Yeah, they say it's always in the finer details that make a deal and can help you build wealth in real estate. And people don't really dive into that much. Like you were talking about the IRR and return on investment and everything involved all the way down to like the minute details. That's where you can really like make the next leap in your real estate journey too. And yeah, that reminds me, like I just got back from Italy a few months ago in like July. We went to Italy and I went on like a wine tasting and just listening to like the guy that makes the wine, and he's like telling the stories of historic facts of the wine, how it's created, like what type of grapes they use, etc. It's cool. It's just cool to see someone passionate about anything, and that is with any type of industry. The second you get so much passion and expertise in it, it's different. It's cool.
Yeah, I think like you look at like in school, right? When you're in middle school and high school, it's like, what was your favorite course? I like science. Why'd you like science? It was because of that teacher. Like that one cool teacher who was so passionate about molecules and stuff. Like their excitement brought it to you. So when you have the good teacher with anything and you see the passion behind it, I think it's a way of introducing you, and you're like, okay, let me look into that. And here we are, right? So cheers to you going to Italy. It's a good time.
Yeah, right. And also wine, very fine wine usually goes with people that do have a good amount of money and like to invest. So it goes hand in hand pretty well together.
It's expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's awesome. All right, so let's dive into a little bit more into commercial real estate as well. Based on like where you are right now in Richmond, Virginia, there's been a lot of talk on just commercial real estate as a whole about like rates, rents that are basically stagnant, like they're staying pretty stable, a lot less supply for the amount of demand out there. Obviously, during COVID, all the prices and the cap rates kind of got wonky. It totally flipped quite a bit in commercial real estate. So what are you currently seeing in Richmond in your area right now with commercial real estate? And that could be, multifamily apartments, or it can go down to like commercial, like retail or warehouses or offices, whatever you deal with.
Yeah, so I do multifamily. If there's a multifamily component to the building, whether it's development, mixed use, anything multifamily, we'll do single family home portfolios. So many doors is what we play in, and our territory is Southern Virginia. So I live in Richmond. If anyone knows Virginia well, you've got DC and then Nova in the top part of the state, right? And then you come down 95 and you got everything else, and that's kind of where we play at. Historically, Virginia, mainly Southern Virginia, has been a place, tertiary markets, where people get priced out of other markets, right? I call the investor search, where an out of area owner may see some cool news or interesting things happening on the East Coast, right? They look in New York and Jersey, way too expensive, and then rent control laws. They can't do what they want to in those markets. They come down to Virginia, they look at DC, which has some rent, and TOPA, where if you own a property in DC, the tenants have to sign off on you selling it. So there's all these like slightly hurdles that investors look at in these amazing primary markets that they say, well, let me keep looking. Then they come down 95 and they see Richmond and the Hampton Roads. I'd say about 75% of our transactions are going to out of area buyers, people who are just searching and seeing returns and yields. Growing market. Richmond has CoStar. CoStar is investing billions of dollars in Virginia. CoStar put their headquarters, their global headquarters in Richmond. And the running joke is, the broker joke is, like, CoStar has access to everything, all the numbers and data, especially at the apartments.com, now homes.com. Like, if they're thinking that Richmond's a good place to put real estate, you should too. Let's chuck to the guys who monopolize data to some degree, right? And we're seeing a lot of investors find out ways to make deals happen. And then in the Hampton Roads, there's such a military presence. You have NASA, you have the Air Force, you have the Navy, the largest port, I believe, on the East Coast for sure, might be in the world. With Evan, we're close, directly straight shot to Europe or shipping. So there's a lot of great industry and Fortune 500 companies and things that are bringing to this area. And once you get into the weeds of understanding these little submarkets, a lot of people are buying and staying. So yeah, that's the overall idea of like the market is still going well. Now, Richmond had 5,500 units coming, Class A. We are seeing a surge. Part of that curve of just activity has been Class A apartments. There's been double digit. We were seeing double digit rent growth for a long time, but now we're at about 3% rent growth, which is where people would normally underwrite years ago, but they were getting 8 and 10 and 12. So we're seeing a massive slowdown across the board, but we're still seeing absorption be fine because of demand and all the reasons Richmond and Virginia is growing. So cap rates are slowing people down. I think a lot of the syndicators have disappeared when rates went up so high. Yeah. The cost of money is so much more expensive for interest rates. Plus, you're pref to whatever LP you're paying to get in a deal. So it's been slow naturally, but I think Richmond is trying to rebound like everywhere else is.
Yeah, it seems like it sounds very similar to Charlotte, which is where I'm at. It's just a lot of new apartment complex buildings are going up, and they're more Class A, rentals. So what that does, what I've seen it do, is they're giving a lot of supply, but it's basically making it to the point that now they have so much rental supply that they can't really increase the rents too much. They almost have to give like concessions to get people in there. They got to stabilize their properties, and in turn, that's a trickle down effect to all like the neighboring properties, like single family homes, smaller multifamilies, etc., that have to compete with those as well. So that stunts rent growth a little bit until those are basically full, and then the building kind of slows down a little bit, which I haven't really seen happen yet in Charlotte. I don't know about Richmond. They keep building, and I think it is because you can build here for a price that makes more sense compared to other places like in, I don't know, California, like San Francisco or the New England area. And those are some areas where the rent growth is still going up, I feel. Even like New York, like it's still like going up. And it's because not as many builders are there, because it's just astronomical pricing that it just doesn't make sense to build there quite as much as on like the Sun Belt area and like in Charlotte, Virginia area. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of been what I've been seeing too. How have you seen people get creative to still purchase commercial properties when they're facing kind of that, I would call it like an uphill battle? It's a timing battle, because I would say if you can get in now with a deal that makes sense, it's just going to flourish in the future anyway, because eventually that's going to slow down and then it's going to hit the trajectory that you're going for. But what do you see now with clients that you're working with? And also, what do you kind of preach to your clients when they're asking questions about like, why is this cap rate so low? Like, what do you think about the rent growth? It's kind of stagnant. Like, what are ways that this could be a long-term great investment investment and how to prepare this project for that?
Yeah, I mean, we work with sellers primarily, and it's the foundation of the conversation, right? A seller, if someone's selling now, we'll say 2024, they either missed out on the big rush a few years ago, or they're looking to retire, or they're having potential some loan issues, right? Those are the three main reasons why anyone's doing anything. If you're good, you're gonna sit tight, ride the wave. The election's done. Everyone's, I call it Fed watch parties every month to see what they're gonna do. So if you're having a good conversation with a seller about the value, and then you're pricing a deal that makes sense. Now on the other side, we're seeing a lot of seller financing, getting creative of how can both sides work together. I think there was so much combating between buyers and sellers where I want what I want, you want what you want, but how can we, like, you want to sell, you want to buy, like, how do we make it work? So seller financing has been way more prominent in the last 2 years with rates being so high. We're still seeing in our area the value add. We've always done so many like C-class value add deals where you're coming in, you're doing a full renovation of every unit. Rent growth is really strong. We still have some of those, but with the surge Virginia has seen, most of these mom and pops who have sold, these deals have already been touched. So it's understanding your definition of value add these days, whether it's operational, whether it's the expenses are probably too much, your insurance, let's look at your insurance because that's hurting a lot of people. You're in Charlotte, so the coastal insurance is skyrocketing. So it's taking a more holistic look at investing versus the one metric of rent growth. 3% is a good way of underwriting. Most people are not going to leave their homes for 3%. And depending on where you are as an owner investor, you can look and push that as high as you want to, or keep it modest for that person and so on and so forth. But much more holistic viewing of the operations. How can we trim expenses as well and not just focus on rent growth alone? What is the minimum effective dose of improvements, right? The idea of doing a blanket renovation may not get you where you want to, because as you were saying before, like the brand new Class A down the street has all the bells and whistles. And if this tenant can figure out a few $100s or a roommate, they're just going to move there. So understanding your process. And then with a falling rate environment, right? You're getting in, the rates drop again, you got day one equity. So there's a bunch of ways of just fundamentals and being true, understanding your objective. And I'd say for deals under 50 units and let's say between under 100, your property manager is so vital. I always say like, hey, there's always the broker underwriting, there's your underwriting, and then what is your property manager underwriting? Like, let's get all people at the table, because if someone's saying someone's crazy here with their numbers, there's going to be an issue. So let's make sure everyone who's involved with this operations is there, so we can really be much more tight with numbers, because the days of pushing rents 15%, it's just not there. So everything's just much tighter across the board.
Yeah, you got to basically look, like you're saying, at a holistic type approach to it, because you can do like a value add, which that's what I mainly do a lot of. It's value add. And you're competing now with like these Class A's new construction. So some investors might look at the Class A new constructions and look at their rents and be like, oh, I can get that when I update my value add. See, it's like, no, you can't, because that thing was just built and it's beautiful and it's pristine. So you're probably going to have to do a little bit of a rent cut to get people to go there compared to like the brand new building. And a lot of investors nowadays might not look at it that way. And then they also, like you said, one of the biggest ways to make money in value add is to make the expenses go down. So you can look at, how much are they paying for electric, water, garbage, like maintenance, things like that. And you find ways to lower that. And that could be, say it's an older building where the owner is paying like all the electricity because they don't have separate meters. Same with like water, they don't have separate meters. Like you can break those off and individually make it to the tenants pay it. That's a huge way to increase the value of a property without even touching the rent. And then same with doing the renovations correctly to the point that you don't have a lot of maintenance after, and doing them the right way first. Like a lot of people might just put lipstick on a pig, and then all of a sudden they're paying tons of maintenance and repairs throughout the whole time of stabilizing and holding the property. And that just eats into your returns and also the value of the property, because it's all about the net operating income, and that's all you want to do. You want to increase that net operating income, and that is how you make money. So can you dive into a little bit more specific, maybe a deal that pops into your mind that you were helping an investor look into, that you had to have these conversations with, and kind of how did it go, and did they end up buying the property? And if they did, how's that process going so far? Because I'm sure you keep in touch and you get up to date like details on how it's going.
Yeah, I mean, when I started, I built my career selling, it was under 15. So a lot of small deals. And this is what, 2015, 2016. We were buying small deals. At that time in Southern Virginia, you're buying from mom and pop. So there's this concept of actuals are what they are. Let me see the actual operations, the T12 financials. Show me the actuals. And if you want value add, if you're an investor who wants to buy anything and you're looking at only the actuals, you're probably going to miss out on a bunch of deals, because I think that there's a lot of different ways to underwrite. And part of my thing is, if you're going to submit an offer to the property, I want to see your underwriting. I want to understand how you came to this number. Maybe I missed something, but we can have a good chance if I know Richmond's Class A vacancies at 3% and you're underwriting 8. Like, the first step, we're off 5%. So when I work with buyers and sellers and just clients in general, again, there's a bunch of deals that come to mind where a mom and pops is old, self-managing, they do what they want, they don't have any debt. They're not forced to make their property perfect or do anything they don't want to do. So when you look at underwriting a small deal or any deal with like a mom and pops that's value add, expect the numbers to be terrible, right? Expect it to be very bad. And a lot of buyers just are comfortable, and that's okay. But it's, you see this, how they're doing it. The idea is, can you do better? And how much can you do better? So I think looking into we've had a lot of deals where it's just, let's understand, okay, their trash bill, like you example, their trash bill is a lot of money. Why is it so much money? Well, they like to have extra cans so that when they drive down the street, they don't see it at the top piling over. Okay. Or there's one restaurant that's a hoarder and they always have stuff and there's always trash everywhere, or there's trash cans weren't secure, so people would drive by and dump stuff off. So like they said, you know what, I'm tired of seeing it. Let's get an extra can that's costing more money. So it's not needed. It just takes more attention to cover that expense. Water bills are always a big one. If you're not doing routine checks. I had a story of a listing now. Someone broke the toilet bowl lid and they stuck it in the toilet. So it was running for about 6 months. And they're like, why is this water bill so high? Because that tenant, they don't pay the bill. So why would they don't care? So I think you look at these things, you just have to be so granular with your understanding of this is where it's at. Doesn't mean it's where it's going. Now on the Class A stuff, it's usually more streamlined and managed. But whenever you're getting a value add game, it's much more mindful about like what can you control and how can you do better? Because if you're buying on actuals, you're not going to buy anything in today's market.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. When you're looking at value add, if you're looking at the actuals and underwriting based on actuals, based on what the seller's trying to sell it for, I bet you 99% of the time it's going to be very in the red. And you're going to be like, I don't want this thing.
Yeah.
But if you underwrite it based on the pro forma of where you're going to get it, and then you see like, okay, this is going to like, once it's done, it's going to be making me like 8% cash on cash return. It's going to increase the value by like X. And then it makes sense. That's how you should be looking at it. And then you can actually make more deals. And that's how banks look at it too. So you want to look at it like kind of the bank looks at it. They're going to look at how it is now, but they're going to look at it where it's going to be. And because they're looking at a long-term property. So they're expecting you to get it to stable and after the value add. And that's where they're thinking like, okay, now it's going to be held for, 20, 25, 30 years. And it's going to be stable enough to just basically run on its own. And then we'll lend on that. So it's very important, like you said, don't just look at the actuals. Of course, if the actuals are like horrific and you're like, wow, I got to like, like there's like only 20% like rented units and like 80% of them need to be like totally rehabbed to be able to be rented. That's when you can be like, okay, am I able to take this much red for this amount of time to be able to get it to the value? That's when you can start really looking at the actuals a lot more, because you don't want to like be in the red too long. You want to be pretty streamlined to get out of it. But you got to look at both and weigh the balance. So speaking of that too, in your experience, since you deal with a lot of sellers, I'm sure you have this conversation all the time where the sellers are like, this property is worth this much once it's value added or stabilized to here. So I want to sell it for that much. It's like, no, because it's not there yet. And then what's the conversation you kind of have with sellers in that predicament? Because I see that so much. And I even have to have conversations with sellers when I make offers. I'm like, you're asking for how much it's worth once it's stable. Why would I buy it at that price to then put a ton of money into it to get it there? Like that makes no sense for me. And sometimes it's hard because like you said, a lot of them don't have debt. They're just holding on the properties. They're just cash flowing. They don't want to do any work to it, but it's not like it's hurting them. They're making money from it. So they don't really have to budge. So like what kind of conversations you have with sellers there and even buyers when they're like trying to look to negotiate with a seller that's kind of have that mindset?
Yeah, it's a tough conversation because depending on where that person's at, I say you have the mom and pops, then you have like the seasoned investor who does this. They understand things. It's how much of the gap and who's going to pay for it, as I always say. So example is if the rents at the property are 500, the market says you can get 1,000 and the owner wants to price at 1,000, the buyer wants to buy at 500 value, right? Like there's always, so now get like, how do you bridge the gap? And it just makes sense. It has to be a logical reason. And so if the property is, you're giving examples from that 500 average rent, if all these units are dated from the 60s, right? No one's touched them. Then I like to say, okay, for a buyer to come in here, they have to invest hard money day one to get these properties turned and renovated and carrying costs of like vacancy, right? Like, so then I like to just there has to be this level of respect and pushback as a broker you have to have with the seller and saying, if we want to find someone that's going to believe any of this operations, we need to be very clear on if you're at 500, it's going to cost $20,000 to renovate day one. And how do we get to that? If I put 20 grand into this unit, am I going from 500 or is a $20,000 renovation getting me to 800, right? Or how do I I think owners that don't have as much data as I do, they see the guy next door getting 1,000, but that guy has central air. He's got a dog park, he's got parking spots, like all those little amenities that we just have to provide owners with data and just have a professional conversation. And when interest rates are at 2.5 and 3%, buyers would take that deal. Like 500, I'll do it immediately. But now when rates are at 7.5, it's much more pushback on it's going to cost way too much. The cost of doing that's too much. Contractors are too expensive. I can't risk all this time and money to go from this upside. I see the guy next door getting 1,000, but I can't get to that 1,000 as fast as you think I can. I'm not willing to pay that cost and be in the red for that long. Whereas during the heydays of COVID, stuff was happening so much faster, but we're just not here now. So it's just more of a being honest and transparent with the seller and the buyer and say, here's my plan of how you go from 500 to 1,000, and then does it make sense? So that's why, again, like when I'm working with a buyer and say, what's your plan for the property? What are you planning on doing it? Because when you're submitting an offer as a buyer, it's I want to put $40,000 into this unit. Well, like, well, does it need 40,000? Because if your offer is based off of this and you can't improve your offer, let's just understand. And I think there's so much stigma around brokers just trying to beat people up. Like, no, I just want to be honest and say, I think you're over renovating for this product type, right? So it's just a lot of data and transparency on the front end.
Yeah. And that's something that people don't know about brokers as much is you're basically the middleman in a way from the buyer to the seller to come to an agreement that benefits both sides. Even if you're this, I'm sure like if you deal with a seller and they're like hard nosed on trying to sell that property for like, if it was $1,000 per unit, but it's really 500 right now, needs room to growth. And they're like, I'm not selling it any less than $1,000 per unit. I'm sure you've told sellers like, then I just can't really work with you because it's not going to sell or it's just not going to work. And people forget that brokers are not there to just list up the building and just make money, especially in commercial properties. There's so much work and so much fine-tuned detail, market analysis. You almost underwrite the deal yourself as if you are buying it to sell it. And then you also, if you're working with a buyer, you're underwriting yourself buy it based on what the seller's looking for returns. And you're talking to contractors, you're talking to like attorneys, you're talking to like the county with like the taxes and things like that. Like you're gathering all the information basically to do the underwriting yourself as if you were buying it to the presenter to then the seller and the buyer. And it's such a great tool, especially if you're the expert in that market. And especially for people that are investing out of state, trying to get into Virginia, trying to get into North Carolina, and then like New York or Massachusetts, the greatest tool you can have is a broker that's boots on the ground and understand the market.
Yeah, I mean, there's what's cool about what I do is I have to pitch a deal 4 times. The first pitch is to the seller, and then it's to the buyer, and then it's the lender, then the appraiser. So like that's 4 people who I have to make sure these underwriting makes sense. So we're talking to an owner about their property. I'm not saying, hey, Wendell, your property is worth $5 million. Let's sign. So you hear that number. I am going through the underwriting step by step. I'm saying, here is what we're putting for maintenance and repairs and reserves. I know you, Mr. Owner, you don't have any debt, so you're not paying for operating reserves, but the buyer will. Mr. Owner, you're in a flood zone. You don't have flood insurance. That's cool. That's good job for taking that risk, but like the buyer had to get flood insurance. So when you are just more clear on the front end with an owner and run through the operations and the underwriting line by line and suggest, this is how buyers are going to be looking at your deal, right? At closer to 500, even though you want 1,000, I like to say, sir, would you buy this deal at this price with these numbers? And usually it's a no. And that's how you can, as a broker, you can gauge, is this owner or this client going to be hard to work with if they don't want to believe some of the data? So there's always this give and take a little bit, and you can lean and, hey, let's say you find that 1031 exchange buyer with 50% down payment, then they may pay more, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're marketing towards that needle in a haystack buyer, then like it just takes longer and it's not nearly as fun. So yeah, it's all a foundation when you're speaking with people.
Yeah, and it also depends on like the sellers, like you said, like their timing, how long they're waiting to sell, if they're in a hurry to sell, if they like need that money ASAP, if they don't. And that's when you can kind of frame who you're going to target as buyers. Because if they can have all the time in the world and they want the highest price possible, wait for that 1031 buyer.
Yeah, sit there.
Just sit around, list it for like a year or two, and eventually someone will be like, oh, I got to put this money in something quick, and then they'll buy it.
Days on market, 400. Well, the seller's not budget. See, like that's okay. Some people want to do that, and everyone has their own goals, and just making sure you're aligned with that seller.
Yeah, and then you mentioned you speak to a lot of banks and lenders and stuff as well, because you do have to pitch to them too. What are you finding with the current banking climate in the Sun Belt area? Virginia is considered the Sun Belt, isn't it?
Yeah, Mid-Atlantic, Sun Belt, close enough.
It's like right there, right? Because it's right above the Carolinas anyway. But I've noticed that around this area, the banks have gotten a lot more conservative. Their rates have jumped quite a bit. And they're also, their LTVs that they're giving is a lot lower, especially with value add. And they really want to see like a ton of data showing that it's one, already kind of stable, and two, it's definitely going to hit the pro forma that you're aiming for. So what are you seeing with the banks, and what are some stories or examples of you negotiating and helping the buyer negotiate with them to make sure that they can get the best lending terms possible?
Yeah, Yeah, so I always recommend that the buyer's first time, find a mortgage broker who you trust and let them go to bat for you. The idea, like the process of getting, if you're on the new side, a new buyer, or trying to go from small, hire a professional in the mortgage. So I've done that enough for clients. I've done this long enough. But in the beginning, you want your mortgage broker to go out and hustle and get you 10 quotes and compare and contrast and understand terms. And the mortgage broker is going to position your deal and underwriting also to make sense to as many brokers. A lot of buyers go to the local guy. They may have their home at this bank. They may have another property at this national bank, but it's usually the credit unions that are really good these days, the regional banks who are way more competitive than the national banks. Unless you have a lot of money in national presence, go to your local credit union and see what they're doing. Because I think most banks with multifamily are still interested. They saw that worst case scenario, the government will step in and make sure people have places to live, right? With what happened during COVID. So banks are still excited, but down payments are closer to 30%. So me, in my experience, when people are submitting offers, we're asking those questions. Say, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, what are you planning on putting your down payment at? If they say 20%, I'm going to just say, okay, where are you getting that term at? Where do you see that at? Because I've done enough of these deals to know that we're closer to 30%. So a lot of this, again, is education. The goal isn't to push back on everything, right? The goal is to say, if you haven't sourced debt yet, you probably want to do that first, that when we submit this offer, it makes sense. And that you don't get retraded by your lender if you only have 20% plus inspections, fees, appraisals, and they want 30 plus that. So I think that's one thing. I meet with a lot of lenders and appraisers and inspectors all the time, because part of the business is I have data, they have data, let's share it. So I think a lot of these deals have deal stories that you need to know. A lender's asking me, Justin, why is this rent at 500? Well, this owner is old and doesn't want to do anything, and they have no debt. So understanding and networking with the right people is important, but helping clients break down the terms and talking with banks is part of my daily job. And then when the appraisers call me and they say, Justin, you sold this deal or that deal, tell me the story. What was the rent comp? Like, well, that's not actually a rent comp because of this. Or we're seeing cap rates trend in this direction. I saw you close this deal. Well, here's a story why that cap rate may or may not make sense for your deal. So brokers do have a level of knowledge that you're not going to see on Crexy or LoopNet or CoStar, right? You got to connect with the brokers and get those nuanced things. But I think as buyers are figuring out their deals, it's much harder because banks are more conservative, but multifamily is kind of the preferred product type these days. And it's just a hustle, right, to get in there. Now, much more relationship lending. On your first deal with a new bank, they're going to be really conservative. You do a few deals, they know you, pay on time, you've paid them back. They are much more likely to give you better deals on the relationship lending side, which has been great. So, if they can't budge on rate, they may be able to budge on other terms. So just find a good lender who you plan on growing with, and we'll do a first deal, take some blanket terms on your first or one or two deals with this bank. And once you get that track record, they'll be much more likely to give you more money or better terms in the long time.
Yeah, that's one of the best things about investing is once you get a track record and start showing that you can do what you're talking about doing, then instead of it's you looking for like money, banks are like, when's the next deal? Because we want to get money. Banks they make money based off lending. That's like one of the best ways to make money. They don't want the properties. They just want to lend you money, the most passive thing ever, and just make money on their money. And they're investors as well that invest in the bank. That's what they want too. So the second you can kind of show that you can do it, banks will start calling you, lenders will start calling you. And once you make that switch, it's awesome. Like it really is great because then people are like reaching out to you with like terms and you're like, oh snap, this is cool.
We got like so many clients are there now. Like we've helped guys double and triple their portfolios where the first deal was pulling teeth. Now they're like meeting with their bank rep, is taking them out to lunch to say, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
For free food. What's our next deal? Rates are here. Like that's how we help our clients go from the hardest. Your first deal is always your hardest. But once you do a few with us or with any broker, you scale and you learn, life just gets easier for everything.
Yep, that is true. Yeah, it's the first one that's always the hardest. And then it just, it's still hard. It's always, real estate's not easy. People make it sound like it's super easy. It's a lot of grind and like the numbers, making sure things are right, researching. But yeah, that first one, taking that leap. And I would say the reason it's the hardest is taking that leap, taking that risk and like trusting the data and trusting the process. And then once you do it and you like finally finish that project, you're like, wow, that actually wasn't that bad. When's the next one? And then that's when you usually get the real estate bug and you start buying a lot more.
You keep spending money on real estate. So.
You make money to spend more money on real estate. Cool. So just to dive a little bit more into like your journey and what you got going on broker side, what is like an important lesson that you've learned throughout your career as a broker that you can give to not only investors, maybe other people that are trying to get as a commercial broker that you would tell your past self when you were just starting?
Yeah, past self, I'd say discipline. Discipline's an easy answer, but with commercial real estate, it is the answer. I make 200 cold calls a week. I'm calling people, and thankfully I've been been around long enough. Cold calls aren't as cold anymore, a little bit warmer and a little bit more nurturing relationship at this point. But starting off is hard. No one knows who you are. No one wants to trust you. You don't have a track record. So why would anyone trust you with their property, selling their property or buying their property? So it just takes discipline, and sometimes it takes being creative. So to a new broker, keep making the calls, right? You keep doing blocking and tackling. To an investor who's losing a bunch of deals because this guy came in with a crazy cap rate or that girl came in with like extra money. Like, you don't know their stories, but you have to stay disciplined because everyone underwrites differently. Everyone has a different background of why they think the property is worth this price. So you just got to keep doing the research and stay true to discipline. A lot of the old guys say, like, you make your money when you buy a deal. And if you buy it right and you stay true to your numbers, your underwriting, you'll be fine. Whether the rates go up or down, a pandemic happens, you'll be fine if you just buy it right on the front end.
Yeah, that's super true. And what I'm seeing a lot too is there was like an influx of new, almost like new investors, I would say, like people that got the bug because of COVID. Like they saw everything going on. They're like, holy smokes, I should probably get into real estate. And then as soon as people started getting into it, that whole thing stopped. And now I would say it's been one of the toughest markets within the past 2 years. I would say the second rates jumped like that fast all of a sudden. It really made the market tough. So if you're a new investor, it's really important to, like you said, to buy the deal at the right price. Because if you're getting emotional about it, if you're just like, I just want to buy a deal, and you're just competing with other investors and you're just like paying way more than you should, that's when you lose money. And I see it all the time here in Charlotte. I have like a fix and flip arm in my business where I go out and I make offers maybe 30, 40 a month on deals. Probably only get like 1 or 2 a month because I'm making the correct offer where it should be. But then you have these investors that might buy 1 or 2 properties that are new and they're paying just ridiculous prices over. And I go back sometimes and I look at like the deal. I'm like, how are they going to make money on this? And I do like the best case scenario. And I'm like, they're going to lose money or it's going to sit. Like they're trying to sell it for way too much after. And people get trapped in that because they just want to, when it's a tough market, they just want to buy something. It's almost like I just want to buy something. That's what they get in their mind. And I'm going to buy something. But you really want to make sure that you underwrite correctly, make sure all the numbers make sense. And just, again, it's all about discipline, doing the same thing every single day. And you will find those deals that work. Don't overextend yourself and put yourself in a bad situation where you're going to be one of those people that are like, I hate real estate investing because of blah, 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 and tell you all the nightmare stories. And usually it's because they did it to themselves because they made a massive mistake in the beginning.
Most times it's like that, unfortunately.
All right. So we'll start wrapping this up because I know you're a busy guy and we got to come up on an hour. And usually we try to keep this at hour or less for the busy brokers and investors of real estate. But I like this question a lot. I just wanted to touch on this. What is something that as you started growing your business and your networking and wealth of yourself and others as well, like what is like a mindset shift or something that changed in you as you went along from when you first started? Like what's like the number one thing that you felt that changed the most, or what did you change that helped you the most?
I really leaned into the 80-20 rule. So I think during COVID, we got, as a broker, right, we were thinking the world's going to come to an end. No one's talking about real estate. No one's doing anything. So I was just gaining momentum. I had a newborn son. It was a few months old at that time. The world shuts down. So I had to really focus on discipline, but also the 80-20 rule. 80% of your outcome is based on 20% of your inputs. And I think that is so true in real estate. Like, what do you have to do that's going to get you the most output? Like, what are the tasks that you need to do? Like, I think everyone is quote unquote busy, but everyone can be busy. Like, are you productive? Are you doing what you need to do? So me getting older in this business, I have to understand if a buyer is real or not. If I have to understand if a seller is real or not. So the younger broker, Justin, any other broker around, right? The owner wants a $1,000 average price. They probably take it. I have nothing else to do. Let me get this deal and run with it. But if it's not sellable, if it's not realistic, even if you have the time, you're end up wasting your time chasing bad deals and chasing deals that don't make sense. And you think because you have the shiny new deal to talk about, at the end, you're going to look worse because then your underwriting doesn't make sense. So you're losing credibility to the buyers and some other people. There might be a reason why the owner's giving you this deal that no one else wants to sell at this price. Maybe, right? So you have to think 2 steps ahead of discipline. What do I need to do? So if you're an investor, at the end of the day, you need to be making a lot of offers. Just like you said, you make a bunch of offers. If my goal is to make money and grow my portfolio, I need to make offers. A lot of people are deterred with making offers. I think my offer is too low, but if you're honest, you support your offer with underwriting and it makes sense, send it. And where we're at in today's market, people are coming back to offers. Now, 4 years ago, we were getting 12 offers on every deal. And then there was like bidding wars and highest and best. But now we're getting 2 or 3. So like if you're disciplined and you think you have a good offer, still send it to that broker or to that owner. They're not getting bombarded with offers like they were years ago. So just be mindful of that. And again, just discipline and don't chase bad deals.
Yeah, don't chase bad deals. Definitely. Trust the numbers.
True
And yeah, like you said, there's a lot of, I guess a lot of people call them, I call them it's like tire kickers out there, which are people that talk a lot of talk. They're like, oh, I want to buy this. I want to do this. I want to sell this. But realistically, they're just kicking tires because they're just talking about it. They're not really trying to do it. And those are the people you don't want to waste your time with at all. And I feel like as you grow and get more experience in real estate, you can pinpoint those people probably within 5 minutes of conversation. You'd be like, okay, yeah.
One of my favorite things with investors, like, so how many is just you or your spouse or your business partner? I had a guy a bunch of times like, I'm buying my first deal. I hate my job. I want to get into real estate. So I'm like, well, how many investors? So he was raising money from friends and family to get 30 investors. He was taking money from like $100 to like $1,000.
Oh, geez.
And by any means necessary, I'm going to buy these deals. And then on the surface, it's like, it makes sense. But on the back end, you're dealing with all these people. I like to say if people only have 100 to give, maybe they're not the kind of investor you want because they have different expectations of the guy who can give 30,000. So those learning curves for investors, you'll take anything to raise money for a deal, but be mindful, like, is that person who's giving you 100 want control over everything? Or those type of investor things is discipline and it's finding the right deals. Just be mindful of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Dealing with investors when you're raising capital it's important to be very upfront and let investors know kind of what the business plan looks like. Like you're going to be giving me money and you're hands off. All right.
Yeah. You're not picking paint colors. You're not picking fixtures. Like I'm going to be doing all that. That guy, he had a guy who wanted to like drive down and go to Lowe's with him every time. Like, let's pick this. No, we're not doing that. Like,
oh my God. No,
yeah, it was a good story there. People will give you money. Great. But you don't want money from everyone.
Yeah. You don't want money with a headache to come along. You could find, but there's so much money out there and there's so many people looking to get into investing. You can find that money somewhere else too. Just network, find people. But I like to finish off with this question. What is like your favorite business, investing, real estate, wine book, whatever, that you could recommend to our viewers that helped you along the way or that you would just recommend?
Multifamily Millions. I forget who the author of that one is. Multifamily Millions is a great book. It's about investing. It was written a while ago. Some slightly dated principles, but it's still there at the bottom level of foundational real estate knowledge. Understanding how to do everything. I think books, admittedly, I haven't had as many books recently. I consume a lot of content on the internet. I mean, podcasts like these, there's a lot of people sharing their stories and you can get a lot of information on YouTube. YouTube University is really strong these days. There's a lot of Discord groups and chat groups out there. I think where people go wrong sometimes is they have their set underwriting model that they got from this one website, but they're not willing to adjust their model for this submarket and that submarket. They're like, this is it, only way I'm underwriting. That's cool, but be mindful of where you're at. So I think being mindful of education, Multifamily Millions is the book that I can think of that helped me as I was learning. And if you're in real estate, there's some sales component to what you're doing, right? So just doing research on what sales actually is, because if you're an investor that wants to jump into real estate, like Wendell, like say you're making 40 offers a month, if you can't deal with losing 39 times a month for a year, you're not going to go far in this business. So I can't think of a book that was, but there's a lot of like, I guess affirmations. It sounds silly, but like it's not you, it's not personal. But if you're in real estate, you're going to lose a lot more before you start winning. And if you're okay with that, you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's for sure. And believe it or not, sales is life. No matter what you're doing, it's sales. When you're trying to get a girlfriend, when you're trying to get a boyfriend, you're selling yourself. When you're trying to go out to eat and you're talking to the waiter, like they're trying to sell you which food. You're trying to talk to someone at your job to get a promotion, you're selling yourself. Everything sells. Everything in life is sales if you get real deep into it. So understanding sales in any aspect is huge because people think of sales like a car salesman, right? Like trying to sell like a used car, but it's really way more psychological about it because you're trying to solve problems and you're trying to understand what that person is thinking about in like the other shoes and how you can help them out and solve their problem. Sales is not just like trying to sell something useless to make money. It's trying to provide a solution to solve issues that might be arising with an individual that you get compensated for. So
exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you take the word broker out, right? Salesman, broker, but if you reframe that word to I'm a problem solver and you believe it, like, yeah, this person has this thing they want. How can I help them do it? And this other person has this thing that they want. How can I help solve problems? And I think it's, if you have to tell yourself that's what it is, but everything is sales.
Yep. Heck yeah. All right. So let's wrap this on up. We've been going for about an hour. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of time to tell the audience how they can connect with you on social media. If you want any meetups in the Virginia, Richmond area that you're in, if you do charity events, if you have business links, or just where to find you and contact you if they want to. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Yeah, again, it's Justin Ferguson. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on a lot of social media channels. My name is just Justin N. Ferguson on LinkedIn. My website is www.justin-ferguson.com. That's that information about me and what's happening in my life. And then Instagram is at justferg1. You can share that in the comments here as well. I'm on social media a lot. YouTube, if you're into wine, you can find me at a wine place, drinking some good wine. And if you're into investing, try and be present and share a lot of social media content with everyone at all levels of investing about my career, helping new buyers and doctors and lawyers and people who know nothing about real estate get into real estate and grow and make money. So yeah, that's how you can find me. Always open to chat and connect. That's what I do all day. I like to talk a lot, and hopefully all the listeners have found value to this conversation today. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they will. And thank you for coming on. And I'm going to put all the information in the bio of the full podcast when it's out. So if you guys want to contact Justin, that's how you can do so. Yeah, thank you for coming on, Justin. And yeah, if you're down in the Charlotte area, because you're pretty close, Richmond's not too far. Or if I'm up in the Richmond area, we'll have to connect and hopefully meet up and taste some wine together.
Yes, we should.
All right. See ya.